Now, we asked the prosecution, just so you know, and the judge to give us behind-the-scenes access as well. They politely declined, but I just wanted to get that out there and let you know that. Criminal defense attorney Janet Johnson is with us now. And Janet, I wanted to talk to you about this, because Hebert says it was a tactical decision,
right,
to go with defense of others and self-defense rather than stand your ground. Would you have made the same choice, and why?
Yeah, I think it's smart. He'd already used stand your ground in a motion for the judge to decide whether he gets the immunity, and it dismisses the whole case if it's granted. So that's a pretty complicated defense. He has to be in a place where he lawfully has a right to be, and I think that's going to be a question. And the judge denied it. It is a little more complicated. I think Mr. Hebert used the right word for a jury, and not to belittle the intelligence of a jury, but it adds an element essentially to say, is he in a place where he lawfully has a right to be? The judge had already said no, so I think throwing that out and just going with straight self-defense sort of makes it a little simpler for the jury to digest.
Okay, so on that then, is the legality of the tow really relevant here?
Well, I think it has two factors. One is if he's essentially stealing someone's car, you could kind of explain why Mr. Rich is peeling off in a parking lot. The other thing is it makes him look kind of like a cowboy. Is he doing something that's a little unsavory? You saw Mr. Hebert doing that, trying to say, look, you're at an after-hours club. Wasn't it Mr. Rich's idea? The flip side is, here's a guy who's like a mercenary tow truck driver. Is that unsavory?
Well, and I want to, this may lead to that unsavory aspect of it as well in some people's minds, because as we understand it, one of the issues in this trial, of course, whether he had the right to tow him, if a tow company such as his has an agreement with area businesses, that if you're parked in a particular spot, you tow them. Is that legal? I mean, is it legal to have an agreement amongst businesses without the city specifying parking spaces? How does that work?
It's legal. It's kind of like a bondsman going and picking people up and, and acting like a police officer. They sort of have these, powers that would seem beyond a normal power. A AAA can do it, but, why would this private company?
Exactly.
Right. Well, and I think that's legal. They have private property and they have a right to police who, essentially police who's in which parking space. But the question is, if you're not under that sign, they went through that with Mr. Murray over and over. Was the sign here? Did you back in this way? I think he went a little over the top with that, because essentially he's, beating up this guy who's crying on the stand about his best friend. I don't know how effective that was, but I think Mr. Hebert thinks he has to prove that this car was not parked legally, so my client had a right to, take his car, essentially.
So he's just trying to give credence to the fact that the car was towed in the first place, and how necessary do you think that is for the jury to know that?
Yeah, I think it's necessary, and again, as he's driving away, the question is he beyond this zone of uncertainty? That's what the judge talks about, and I think that's going to be the question. Is this guy, if you were in his position and you didn't have $150 or $250, which I think he was really belaboring that point. I'm not sure that was that effective. But, if you didn't have that money and you want to take your car home that night, would you have a right to drive off the parking lot? I think a jury may feel sympathetic towards Mr. Rich and not so much towards this mercenary tower.
Well, not only that, but as I understand it, the car wasn't in the impound lot then.
Right.
How much difference does that make as well?
Well, I think it also has two factors, because they were towing so many trucks at 150 or so many cars at 150 a pop that they had to put this lot together where they could keep cars temporarily and then, in shifts, get them out of there. Essentially, I think it will tell the jurors, look, what was the harm? Why was he so eager to get his $150 that he wouldn't let this guy just drive his car away? He's right there. He has the keys. Just let him go, and none of this would have happened.
So how do you think Murray did on the stand?
I thought he was very sympathetic. Sometimes when you put a person on the stand and you tell them, look, dress in a suit with a tie, he was wearing a yellow sweater. He was crying. I thought he did really well. And when a defense attorney gets too aggressive with these kind of minor points and saying, was it 150 or 250? I think, it looks like you're beating him up. And Mr. Hebert's a pretty big guy. And here's Mr. Murray who's crying about his best friend. Your heart goes out to him, I think.
But what could the defense do at this point in the trial to try to score some points for their client?
I think to make the point of this car, this zone of uncertainty, that this car was going to hit either him or the woman who was standing there. And if he hadn't shot into the car, it was either them getting hit by a car or killing, unfortunately, Mr. Rich.
And what about the prosecution? Where do you think they need to continue to go with this?
Yeah, I think
what's their main argument, their main point, do you think?
I think their main point is subliminally telling them, you should not condone what this tow company is doing. You shouldn't reward them by letting them be these cowboys, taking people's cars and then shooting them as they're driving away. Make it seem almost illegal that they were doing that.
But what if it's not illegal?
Well, then that's...
I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
If it's not illegal, you still have to decide, is this what a reasonable person would do? Would a reasonable person think this car is going to kill me and I need to shoot him? It's very hard to prove what a car, every day cars almost hit us in the street. You're crossing the street. We don't want people going around shooting those cars. That's what the prosecution has to say. This isn't vigilantism. You don't shoot someone just because he's driving his car away from a parking lot.
Okay. Thank you so much, Janet. Janet Johnson with us. We appreciate it. The night of the shoot.